Hello and welcome to the Fertility Foundations podcast, where we go into detail about how to prepare the foundations for a healthy pregnancy. We dive deep into the underlying root causes of fertility issues and natural solutions. I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not broken. I hope that by sharing these episodes, it will help you move from feeling overwhelmed and lost to feeling hopeful and empowered to take charge of your own path to parenthood, because there are actually lots of things that you can do to help rewrite your own story. I'm Sandra Greenbank, nutritional therapist, functional medicine practitioner, coach and educator, specialising in fertility, pregnancy and postpartum health. I'm also the founder of the Fertility Nutrition Centre, where you can find fully trained experts in nutrition, lifestyle and functional approaches to healthy fertility and pregnancy. You can find out more information over at www.fertilitynutritioncentre.org and also book a free strategy call with one of our experts. Today I'm speaking with Sarah Nash about IVF as a first-line treatment to trying to conceive with PCOS. Sarah is a registered nutritional therapist helping women with PCOS manage their symptoms and increase their chances of conception. Diagnosed with PCOS in her late 20s, it was Sarah's own fertility journey that led her to nutritional therapy and showed her firsthand the impact that personalised nutrition and lifestyle changes alongside targeted supplementation can have on a couple's ability to conceive. Now a mum of two daughters, she's passionate about educating and guiding women who struggle with PCOS and their partners on their journey to parenthood. Sarah takes a holistic approach in her work with clients, digging deep into their medical history and current symptoms to uncover and address the root cause and key drivers behind their individual PCOS picture. This podcast is sponsored by Invivo Healthcare, a human microbiome company. They specialize in accurate testing of different microbiomes such as the gut, vagina, oral and urinary tract, as well as a range of specially curated supplements focused on the microbiomes. They support healthcare providers and their clients navigate the complex world of the human microbiome, and it's one of the most used labs and supplements by our own fertility specialists at the Fertility Nutrition Centre. Visit the Invivo website for more information at www.invivohealthcare.com. Now let's get into today's interview with Sarah. Hi Sarah, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Please, could you introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Yeah, sure. I'm Sarah. I am a registered nutritional therapist and I work with fertility clients, mainly with women who have PCOS and are trying to conceive.
Okay. And you're one of my practitioners in the Fertility Nutrition Centre group as well. So obviously I know you very well. And your special interest is in PCOS. And what made you decide to specialise in that area particularly?
So it was really my own fertility journey and my own PCOS journey. So I was diagnosed with PCOS in sort of my late 20s. I want to say maybe sort of around 27, 28, when me and my husband were thinking about starting a family, and we had sort of been trying for a little while and nothing was really happening. So I went to see the GP, who then obviously sent me for multiple tests, and I had an ultrasound, and they then confirmed the PCOS diagnosis, and they offered me a kind of ovulation stimulation drug. I think it was Clomid at the time. And I didn't really want to take it. I've never been sort of a big fan of taking medications, so it wasn't really something that I wanted to do. And I think deep down, I kind of felt there must have been a different way, or, you know, a more kind of natural way of going about this. So we just kind of waited for a bit, and, you know, I sort of put it at the back of my mind, and we just carried on trying for a while, and it just, yeah, absolutely nothing happened. At that point, it had probably been about 2 years, and I was just getting to the point where I thought, I just don't know what to do anymore. And, you know, this is something that I come across with PCOS clients all the time now, that there's just no support from the GP. They kind of diagnose you and then they send you on your way, you know, maybe with a drug to take, but there's nothing, no sort of, no kind of advice, no suggestions on what to do. So I then kind of started trawling through the forums, you know, and then obviously you go down this little rabbit hole of trying different supplements and, you know, trying all these different things that people recommend. And that also wasn't working. And then I just really randomly came across a nutritionist, and I just thought I haven't got anything to lose, and I'm just going to go and see her. And just kind of talking to her was so, it was just amazing. I think firstly, just the fact that she cared, she was listening, she wanted to know what was going on. She then sent me for some private blood tests, and then she adjusted my nutrition. She spoke to me about my lifestyle. She put me on a supplement program, and I was pregnant in 3 months.
It's the usual story. It's like and then what people say is, I wish I'd come to see you for, as soon as I knew there was a problem.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of one of the main things for me. Most of the clients I work with will come to me and they say, I'm ready to try anything now. It's been such a long time and nothing has worked, and I'm just throwing everything at it. And I think for us, especially from the FNC, from the Fertility Nutrition Center, it's very much about getting the word out there and kind of encouraging women to see it as a first stop rather than a last ditch attempt, because then we have so much more power and more time. And I think it's important to get the word out.
Yeah, get your ducks in a row, because whatever happens, if you don't get pregnant naturally, or if you have to have some treatment, whatever that treatment might entail, you're going to be in such a better place physically and mentally and emotionally to not just get more positive results, but also cope with it better, because it's tough, isn't it? And so before you went to the GP and before you started to conceive, did you have any inkling that there was something going on? Do you have any symptoms?
So I have always had really irregular periods, or I guess when I say always, I guess it was this, you start getting your period and it was always wacky. And I just thought that was sort of part of the normal process. And then I started going onto the pill. So then obviously I was thinking everything is fine. But, looking back and in hindsight and knowing what we know now, it's that, the pill is not, it doesn't regulate anything. It just covers what's going on. And then when I stopped taking the pill, my cycles were still really wacky, but I was always kind of putting it down to the fact that, I had just stopped the pill and probably things were okay. And I sort of, I knew something wasn't 100% right, but I had no sort of idea that it would be PCOS. And I think I hadn't really sort of spent a lot of time looking into it, really. I just, you sort of go into it and you think everything will be fine. And we were young. And I just thought, oh, this will be easy for us. And then, it's easy until it's not.
That's really interesting, actually. And some people, because the classic symptoms are things like facial hair growth or, testosterone-related symptoms or difficulties losing weight. But you're right. If your symptoms are quite diffuse and they're just irregular periods, and you've been on a pill for 15 years, you have a quote unquote period, which is just a false bleed, and you might have no idea at all. And then what did your GP do? Did they just send you for a scan and blood tests?
Yeah, they just sent me for a scan and blood test. I don't remember quite what came back from the blood test, but I know that they diagnosed me based on the ultrasound, where they could see the string of beads, those sort of, I know they call it cysts, but obviously it's just like under-matured follicles, a lot of them. And it gives that sort of cyst-like appearance. Whereas now we know that, we should be diagnosing based on the Rotterdam criteria, and there's different things that they should be looking at. But I think things have come on so much. Like at the time, I think it was all a little bit slapdash. This is 15 years ago now. But yeah, that's what happened.
Did they ever talk to you about IVF? Because that's usually kind of like the very next step.
They didn't actually. They didn't then. They just offered me the medication and I declined. And then, yeah, they just sent me on my way. So there was no signposting, no support in any way at all at the time.
So I think this can be very sort of dependent on your GP surgery and also individual GPs within the same surgery as well, and what support they offer and but the guidelines, I suppose, if they're following the guidelines, they are quite clear. And, the only option really is to try some drugs. And then if they don't work, let's go for IVF. And so where do you come into that? And how do you support these women? Or women, I mean, it always takes two to tango, and I don't want to say you're just supporting the woman, but the specific diagnosis is with the female, and then that does never mean that the male partner is also, off the hook. But
yeah, no, that's exactly right. I do always encourage my client to bring their male partners along, if they're willing to, because like you say, it does take two to tango, and only because the female might have a PCOS diagnosis, that doesn't mean that there might not be something wrong with the male or that there's not any room for improvement. I'm yet to see someone where there's not any kind of room for improvement. There's always something that we can do. But yeah, so I support them, in a few different ways. So obviously, I look at their nutrition, and with PCOS, specifically, one of the kind of key hallmarks of that is insulin resistance. So that inability to efficiently balance our blood sugar levels. So, when I look at insulin resistance with clients, it's very much about looking at the composition of our meals, so making sure there's loads of protein in there, loads of healthy fats, lots of lovely, brightly colourful vegetables, all of those kind of things. So it's just about making sure that you put your meals together in a balanced way. Then we also look at gut health, because we know that we need a healthy gut for healthy hormones. So, we're looking at probiotics and prebiotics. The prebiotics are things like onions and leeks and garlics, legumes, so beans and lentils and things like that. But also making sure that we avoid any kind of inflammatory things. So making sure we don't have too much sugar, alcohol, not too many sort of processed foods, making sure we try to cook from scratch as much as we can. And, it's also about making sure that they have an adequate nutrient intake. So obviously, depending on our preferences, what we like to eat, what we don't like to eat, we all have our own individual nutrient gaps. So it's about making sure that we plug those gaps, because, our body obviously needs an adequate amount of nutrients to function properly, but also kind of looking forward, because we're doing this hoping to increase chances of conception. So, pregnancy is so taxing on the body. It requires a huge amount of nutrition. So it's really important that we just build up those nutrient stores, in preparation for pregnancy.
There's some classic ones that are almost always missing in PCOS, isn't there? Like vitamin D, for example, which is, independently so important for fertility. So it could be that, like you said, plugging those gaps actually gets you a really, really kind of far on your way to being able to get pregnant. But also, once you are pregnant, the body does adjust so that your digestion and absorption increases, and you do get more from the food that you eat. But actually, if you haven't got enough in your stores or coming in, baby tends to get what baby needs at the expense of mum. And so actually, for you to be well and stay well throughout pregnancy and also post-pregnancy is a key concern for us, because as long as mum is well, baby will be well and looked after. And this is kind of like sometimes a bit of a leap for people to, because I think they want that positive pregnancy test, and the rest is sort of not irrelevant, but it's kind of like it's not on the radar. And it's like, we really want to do all of it. And that's also part of why we take some time isn't it? Sort of really allow you that time to get yourself up to scratch. Sorry, I interrupted you there, but
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, if you go into pregnancy already kind of on the cusp of depletion, like you say, baby will take what it needs, and it's then in that phase really, really hard to get your levels back up. And having those kind of nutrient levels is not just important for obviously the baby's development, but it's also helping you then to feel better throughout the pregnancy. Because if you're running out of different things, then that will manifest in just not feeling great, not having energy, all of those kind of things.
Pre or postnatal depression, with the zinc, the omegas, all of those important nutrients, which are so important for baby, but so important for mum's brain health as well. And, the whole baby brain phenomenon, which I think is definitely because baby just takes so much.
Yeah.
And we store fats in our brain, we store the healthy fats in our brain, and that's where it's going to come from if it's not in your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, getting those healthy fats into your body just through diet alone is really hard. So I would always recommend a really good omega-3 supplement anyway, because really, unless you eat like oily fish, 3-4 times a week, it's difficult to get to those levels that you need, particularly in pregnancy.
But also you shouldn't be eating oily fish 3 or 4 times a week if you're pregnant, because it's highly contaminated. So it's tricky. It's definitely that balancing. But it's such an easy thing to check as well, your omega-3 levels versus other fats. And it's just a blood test, which is super.
And actually then on that topic of contamination with fish, it's just as important when you look for a supplement that you really go for something that is of really high quality and as pure as it can be. So, and that is something that I talk to with clients a lot, is when you look at supplements, it's actually one of the things where you do get what you pay for. Obviously there's a huge amount of things that you can just go into Boots or Holland and Barrett, and there's loads of things that you can just buy there. But a lot of the times they're just, the dosages of those aren't therapeutic, or the ingredients aren't quite as good quality as we'd like them to be. And particularly with fish oil, or omega-3, that's a really important point.
Yeah, and there's very few brands that we would use now, and they're all independently batch checked for contaminants, and you can look those up, and that's obviously an expense for the company producing the fish oils, which is it is passed on to you, but it gives you that safety in the knowledge that you're not inadvertently getting a load of whatever the contaminants may be, which sadly is in fish now. So we touched a bit on the fact that the man, if you are in a couple with a man and a woman trying for a baby, it's not always the case either. But and I think that as soon as a problem is found with one of the partners, all the other checks stop. And I just think actually, you might have PCOS, but that might not even be the reason for you not getting pregnant, because if you're ovulating, even if it's once every 2 months, you are actually potentially able to get pregnant. And the reason why you're not getting pregnant could be to do with something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, men don't have to go through anything invasive, hardly ever. All we need is a sample in a pot, and you'd be checking the usual, a usual semen analysis and probably a DNA fragmentation test. I mean, ideally that. And what do you think about that?
Yeah, really important. And I always recommend at least a standard semen analysis through the GP, so we can get an overall idea already of what's going on. And, we know that semen parameters are falling off a cliff. So it's really, really important to look at that. And with DNA fragmentation, I wish that was just part of the NHS testing routine, because it's just so important to look at that. And, when we get back a semen analysis, it could be looking great, but actually there could be quite a lot of DNA fragmentation going on, which then obviously is really detrimental for the ability to conceive. So yeah, I recommend it a lot. It's very dependent, obviously, on the willingness of the client to do it.
Yeah, that's true. Getting both people in can sometimes be a struggle, but not always. But I think that, the more you can make it a joint effort to work together to change your lifestyle, to get to the bottom of what's going on, is the better you're going to, again, not just, your results wise, but you're just going to feel so much better and emotionally if you can actually feel supported by your other partner. And yeah, these tests cost money, but ultimately nothing is going to be as expensive as an IVF round.
Yeah, exactly right.
And will cost anything like IVF. So
yeah, absolutely. And, even if you are funded, going on an NHS funded IVF course, doing those kind of tests will only increase your chances. Because if you find out that there's something going on, then you can work on it. If you go in blind, then you might find it doesn't work. And if only then you go for testing, you've already lost that round. And it is a huge amount of money.
Yeah. And so what would you say some of the challenges women are facing then when they're firstly trying to manage their symptoms, which can be quite good? One of the main things that sort of pushes people to come and see us, because it's, I think it feels obvious that we can help, is the difficulty in losing weight. And so weight gain or trying to lose weight is associated with food. And that's what people understand that we can help them with. So, and that's often what I see is I've been told to go and lose weight because I have to, so that I can get on the IVF treatment list. But I've tried to lose weight all my life and I don't know how to do it without starving myself.
Yeah. And, with PCOS, and I can say that from personal experience, it's not about dieting. So, a lot of the clients I see already have an amazing diet. So, if you look at it on paper, you say, but you should be losing weight. You're doing this and you should be losing weight. But actually, what's really important with this is working out, like, what is your individual root cause that is driving that PCOS for you. So, even though we're looking at all these women and they all have PCOS, they all have really varying symptoms and their underlying drivers can be really different. So we know that there's 4 different types of PCOS. One is mainly driven by insulin resistance. Then we've got inflammatory PCOS, adrenal PCOS, so very much stress related, and also post-pill PCOS, which, can be caused by hormonal contraception. And depending on what your kind of underlying thing is, your underlying cause, that's really what you have to look at. So, if we assume someone is already having an amazing diet, but they're not paying attention to their insulin levels, if they've got insulin resistant PCOS, it's then really about kind of going in and making sure that we work on that. So, in that case, it's probably increasing protein and doing things like going for a walk after a meal to kind of help balance blood sugar levels, and just kind of digging in how they live, what their lifestyle is, and just sort of picking out where they can do different things to support that. And equally, if you have adrenal PCOS, you could be eating the most amazing diet, but if you're not managing your stress levels, then you're not getting to the root of the problem. So, and I think that's what we all do at the Fertility Nutrition Center. It's about personalized, targeted recommendations. So, we look at everything. We look at their medical history. We look at their current symptoms. We look at their diet. We look at what they do for work. What are they exposed to, like where their touch points with environmental toxins, all of those kind of things. And from that, then we get an idea of what's actually going on. And then obviously to support that, we also offer lots of different functional testing that sort of goes really above and beyond what they would be offered by the GP as routine screening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of people will understand that one of the main ways to address PCOS via diet is to go on a low carb diet. And like you say, if your PCOS is adrenal driven and you're going on a super low carb diet, but you're still stressed and you're not sleeping properly, the low carb is probably going to be an additional stress on your body, and then it's going to change your metabolism, because that's a natural response, and that's what your body's supposed to do. So often your body's doing something which is what it's supposed to be doing in any given circumstance, and you have to then look at the circumstance and change it to change your body's response and kind of say, this is what's going on, and because it's ultimately governed by your brain, because the brain listens in on a feedback loop and listens to hormones and, your emotions and everything, the blood sugar, everything that's going on is communicated back into the brain. And then the brain makes the decisions off the back of that in terms of, is this a good time to have a baby? Or, and so we're just kind of looking at what signals are going in and pushing and maybe pulling and pushing some levers to try and support your body to do what we want it to do ultimately, which is to feel safe to have that baby. And the same, if you're going into starvation mode and over exercising, that is not sending the right signals to the brain.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I think about reducing carbs is, that is one way to reduce your insulin levels. So we're talking about, when we're talking about insulin resistance, it's about addressing, firstly, reducing insulin levels, because high insulin is inflammatory and it's a process that we don't want it going on. But that's only one piece of that puzzle with the insulin resistance. The resistance issue is with the cells themselves and how the cells operate and how the cells are responding to the insulin that's in the bloodstream. And if they're not responding properly, again, the brain is just going to scream louder by putting in more insulin into the circulation. And so, fixing that on a cellular level is actually all to do with diet and exercise and lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that point you're making about, eating a low carb diet can be a stressor on your body, I think that's really interesting. And I think that's something that a lot of people are not really aware of, that when we talk about stress, and I find stress is always involved in a PCOS picture for multiple reasons. But, when we talk about stress, what we think of is this work stress or financial stress or relationship stress, but actually there's a huge amount of physical stresses going on all the time that we're not even really thinking of. So, like you said, not eating properly or over exercising is really stressful for the body, and the body can't distinguish what kind of stress you're experiencing. The response is always the same, and the response is that your kind of digestion and any kind of system of your body that is not immediately required for survival shuts down. So, it's going to affect your digestion. It's very much going to affect your reproduction, because your body is suddenly in a phase where it's saying, well, I'm under attack, I'm not safe. So stress is a huge factor in PCOS, and something that we really need to look at more closely with everyone.
Yeah, and I think that actually recognizing stress is also sometimes, a little bit misunderstood, because somebody might be, there's the fight and then there's the flight, but it's also the fawn, which I think we forget. And if you're somebody who sort of goes, I feel so overwhelmed, I don't even know where to start, and then you end up doing nothing and you're procrastinating a lot.
Yeah.
That is a stress. That's the symptom that you're actually so stressed that you've just kind of flopped, and your body's going, I can't actually cope anymore. And also equally that person who's like, yeah, I exercise and I feel great, and exercise is good and more can only be better. And it's like, oh, and that's almost the hardest, to convince people that, like, no, you need to do like yoga instead of like the spinning 3 times a week. And just really looking at, again, like what are you putting out, and what's the response to that. So I find it so, and this isn't an overnight thing, is it, either, with PCOS, especially PCOS. I mean, we always want 3 months at minimum with people, because it does take that amount of time to mature a batch of eggs, and but with PCOS it can take a little bit longer.
Yeah. And, I always say that PCOS is, if it doesn't come overnight, PCOS doesn't come overnight. It's years in the making. You can't expect it to be fixed overnight. So, you need to give it a bit of time. But what I find really important as well is, particularly with women who are under a certain amount of pressure to lose weight to be able to get onto that IVF list. They are trying to lose that weight so quickly, and we need to sort of bear in mind that actually our adipose tissues, our fat tissue, is where all of the toxins are stored that our body can't kind of deal with. Everything gets stored in the fat tissue. So it's really important that we lose that weight in a sustainable way, not just to keep it off, but also to kind of have a really slow release of that adipose tissue. Because otherwise, if you lose weight so quickly, then all of these kind of toxins are released at once. And then that's another kind of stressor and another issue for your body. So, I completely understand this, but I want to get on that list and I want to lose it quickly. But there's just a little bit more to think about with that.
That's true. And actually, it's the liver that has the bulk of that work to deal with those toxins. And actually, the liver is so important if you are going to be prescribed medication as well. That's another thing that the liver has got to deal with. And we don't want to end up with a bottleneck that sort of then it spills over. And, it's just another reason why you need to work with a nutritionist.
Yes.
Make sure that your detox pathways are properly supported, that your gut's functioning, so that, the toxins are excreted instead of just staying in the system. And so lots of challenges, but also actually lots of things that you can do, which is, really so empowering for people. And so if, say, you've been working with somebody and they're not getting pregnant naturally, what's the next step for them?
So, I mean, if someone has PCOS and they, I guess, sort of, if they've already worked with me, if they then need to go through IVF for whatever reason, then obviously we will support them through that. And the kind of changes that we make, even if it means they won't be able to fall pregnant naturally. And, there's lots of reasons for that. Obviously, there could be something structural going on, or, loads of things like that. Then, we're there to hold their hand through that IVF process and help them through it and work with their clinic to support them that way. If they don't know that we're here and they are trying to fall pregnant, for them, then obviously a lot of people will go to the GP, and then the GP will send them for fertility treatment. Or, I guess the initial step a lot of the time is they will go in and they will be prescribed a stimulation drug, like an ovulation stimulation drug, or metformin tends to be the kind of drug of choice now, I find. And again, the way in which that works is it helps to balance blood sugar. But like we've already mentioned earlier, is if blood sugar is not your sort of underlying issue, then those kind of things don't tend to work. And I see in clinic, metformin has got a really mixed success rate. So for some people it works great, for some people it doesn't work at all. So yeah, it's very much about finding that root cause, but if they then go through this metformin treatment that doesn't work and they get referred to IVF, then it's also often just a huge amount of waiting. And it's that kind of waiting time that you can be really proactive about, in that time. That's a great window to then come to see someone, like ourselves from the Fertility Nutrition Center, who can sort of support you and make changes and really set you up for that IVF cycle so that you've got the best possible chance.
Yeah, I think I was actually recommended metformin in pregnancy because I had gestational diabetes. I've got a very, very strong family history of diabetes in my family. And so it wasn't surprising that that was an issue for me in pregnancy. But what tends to happen is your insulin resistance gets worse the larger your waist circumference. And as your belly grows in pregnancy, your insulin resistance increases. So the problem with going into pregnancy already needing metformin because your insulin resistance is a problem, you're going to need more and more and more probably in pregnancy if you don't address the diet and the lifestyle and the cellular uptake and, what your diet is doing to actually push the insulin high in the first place. And then, eventually you might even end up on injections towards the end, which, supposedly is fine and, safe and all this, but it's just not a nice thing to have to do in pregnancy. And, regardless of the safety data or not, as it, it doesn't feel good to be on a drug when you're pregnant because you will be worrying about your baby. And particularly if you've had problems getting pregnant, your anxiety is higher already. So I just think there's so many reasons why, you might want to try something else first before you get to that point of trying the metformin, because, there's just so much that we can do. And even something like inositol, has been found to be possibly more effective than metformin. But once you're on a drug that's doing something, we shouldn't really be using a supplement that does the same. So, because then you're sort of doubling up on the action and it might be detrimental. So it's just so important to sort of really have a go and try everything before you go down that route, I think personally, and just from my own experience as well. But there are some other risk factors as well, I think, with PCOS that sort of come later, potentially during IVF and during pregnancy, that we can also try to mitigate by just pulling back as much as we can before we go into it. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, women with PCOS are just generally at a higher risk of developing sort of certain health conditions throughout life. So particularly, type 2 diabetes and things like cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure, and even things like certain endometrial cancers. So, even if you have PCOS and fertility is not your main priority, there's so much to be said for kind of making sure that you learn to control your symptoms and you learn to support your body, because you are really investing in your future and in your health. And if we are looking at fertility as the main priority, then obviously, yes, there's a huge amount that we want to do to be able to increase the chances of conception, but also we know that the health of a couple at the time of conception has got an effect on their lifelong health of their baby. So, investing in your health that way means that you're not only giving yourself the biggest chances of success when it comes to conception, but you also know that you're making an investment in your children's health, which I think can't be underestimated. Like, that's a massive thing.
There's actually some new data that shows that babies who are exposed to higher levels of testosterone in utero are more likely to develop PCOS.
Wow, yeah.
And I think, it may not even be, it's probably partly genetic, but also partly to do with your exposure in utero. And it's just so interesting. And that's just another reason why you just want to, and it's all about the epigenetic imprinting that you're doing on your baby during the egg development, during the sperm development, during pregnancy. And that window of opportunity is, when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
And if you do have gestational diabetes when you're pregnant, your children are at high risk of developing diabetes in their lifetime. Yeah. So there's just so many reasons, but also the risk of hyperstimulation with IVF drugs when you've got PCOS, and also the high risk of preeclampsia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting, another point where you're mentioning this sort of link of the children developing PCOS. And there's definitely a strong family link. And, personally, I can see if I look at my mom, she's not been diagnosed, but it's almost like I can sort of see, it's like, do you think if you were to kind of check now, you might have PCOS? And I have 2 daughters. So there's definitely a part of me that thinks, like, I wish I had put more time into this before I fell pregnant. I just wasn't aware, and it's like, now I know better, so I do better. But for me, it now means I look at my children and I do everything I can now to support them already on their journey. Like, I never use plastic bottles or melamine plates, or, like, I really try to avoid those kind of touch points with endocrine disruptors for them, throughout their life. I cook in a certain way for them. I put in so much work. And I think that's another thing, if you have PCOS and you want to have children and you do end up having daughters, then because of the things that you've learned, you can pass that on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I look at them now and they know kind of how to eat. They've sort of grown up with it and they're really comfortable with it. And I think it's really important for us, when we know something, and for me personally, I think I've gone through that journey. I've tried different things. I know what's worked and what hasn't worked. And, even though we're all different and we all have different causes, the kind of recommendations we make for PCOS clients overlap. So there's certain things that I know I can pass down already. And that's, I kind of like to think we're doing our bit for the next generation with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And one of the things I really sort of visualized, I suppose, when I set up the Fertility Nutrition Center was helping more people. And I was like, I can only help a certain number of people working on my own in my own little, in my house, because I work from home. And I thought, I'm going to train all these nutritionists to do this work, because we can go out and teach more people how to eat for life, and they will pass this on to their children, and they will pass it on to their children, and this will have a ripple effect, and we can do so much more together than one of us could ever do on our own. But I truly believe that public health changes and improvements start with actually preconception health and teaching parents to be how to eat, because the biggest burden on the NHS is diabetes by far. And, that is a diet and lifestyle related disease. Yeah. The vast majority of those people can be helped, and, much reduced medication, much reduced kind of complications. And, my dad's diabetic, and, I've seen it, I've lived it. And I saw it, you know, with the stress and, you know, all of this growing up with the smoking. And, you know, I see now, you know, the results with kind of, you know, he's on dialysis now, and, you know, the kidneys have taken such a hit, and, you know, it's just so upsetting. So I suppose it's like the mission is to like really get there, but it starts with our children, doesn't it? It starts before the children are born.
Yeah.
Like 100%, like you know, I've believed this for the last, you know, 15 years I've been doing this, but the science is actually now catching up, isn't it? You know, it's there now. We know this to be true now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, what I can see has changed from when I was trying to conceive, you know, 10, 15 years ago. Things have changed. There's a lot more. I mean, I think really, you know, when I went to see the nutritionist, I was living in Australia. I don't think in the UK, it was not anything I had heard of at the time. And I think it's grown so much over the last 10 or 15 years. And, you know, I remember how we came back from the fertility show this year, and we were really positive about it because last year there was still a lot of people kind of scratching their heads and going, I don't really understand what you do. And this year there were so many people who were really clued up. They had done their research. They know that we're around, and it's just really lovely. And it's, you know, I was saying you can feel that the tide is changing slowly, and it's mind blowing, really.
I think it is, but until everyone who's about to try for a baby comes and sees one of us, like, my work is not done.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
still struggling, and you know, another thing actually that I'm seeing kind of a little bit of a change is actually young women who come to us and they say, I'm not ready to have a baby yet, but when I am, I want to know that I'm not going to have a problem because I've been told I've got PCOS and I just want to get my ducks in a row now. And that is like,
that's the dream.
The dream. You know, it's just such a nice thing to be able to help people with, because then you know that, you know, they can maybe plan their family in a different way, which is so nice. And and I agree with you. I do, you know, my kids, you know, they're like, oh, you know, and I'm like, you have to, they're like, oh, the protein, but you know, the beans have protein. I'm eating beans. Look at me. And I'm like, yeah, but you have to have some chicken. And I'm like, and have another, you know, and they're like, oh, I know. Because we count that. I just make them have like a certain number of colors every day. And they're like, oh, I've already had 5. And, you know, I had an apple as well. And it's always like a negotiation, but like they know the principle.
Yeah.
You have to find the protein on your plate. You have to have the colors, you know, not too much bread or potatoes if you haven't, you know, like it's just about that balance. It's such as really quite simple things, really, but and I think, it's almost just sort of like coming away from, and also that I think the English thing of, you know, I come from Sweden, so we eat quite differently, but it's like that very sweet carby breakfast, which is like, as soon as you change people's breakfast, they feel so different.
Yeah. I mean, I must say personally, I struggle with the savory breakfast. I know that it's, you know, what I should be doing, but I really struggle with it. And I think kind of, you know, having worked on the way I eat for a lot of years, there are ways that you can have a breakfast that is not savory, you know, but you can have something like a really nice French toast with a really good sourdough bread, and then with like a heavy sort of Greek yogurt and some fruit and a little bit of honey. So suddenly you've got a sweetish like breakfast that's still really good for you. You know, it's still got all the protein, it's got the fruit, and then I sprinkle like seeds over the top, so you've got healthy fats and things. It's just about making sure that you sort of balance it properly, and, you know, always looking at meals and going, what can I do better about this? Can I add something else into it that will make this better for me? Like, I find I sprinkle seeds on everything. It's like my go-to, or nuts on things, you know, just or like half an avocado. It's just about kind of looking at it more closely. And I think once you get into the habit of planning your food, it's really hard to go back on that.
I mean, we do the same. So it's like if you have pancakes on a weekend, don't stop eating pancakes. Just put an extra couple of, one or two eggs in there.
Yeah.
Have it with some nut butter on top, some Greek yogurt, and then choose berries or fruit instead of jam. And that's like a huge, that immediately is like a million times better than your standard batter, which is mainly flour and then with sugar and lemon, or really heavy, well, like jam is sort of 50% sugar, isn't it? And you can just shift it a bit. And that's what we always do, isn't it? You just start where you are and move it along slowly. So you're not going to go from kind of eating, a sugary cereal to kind of kippers.
No, exactly.
It can happen, but
oh gosh, I don't think I could do that. Exactly. It's about building habits, and I also always say to clients, like, we make those recommendations and I can sometimes almost see the panic in their eyes, and I say, I'm not expecting you to nail this in a week or even 2 weeks. It's like, it takes time. You're changing habits, and we know from James Clear that changing habits takes 66 days. It's like, give yourself a break, like be kind to yourself in that process of making the changes, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's like New Year's resolutions. I always say, if I wasn't able to do it in the whole of the last year, I'm not going to be able to do it in the first 2 wees of January. It just doesn't work. You need to give yourself the time, and I think sometimes clients will come to us and they are worried. And a lot of the things I say is, are you going to tell me to stop eating biscuits? Yeah. And, I don't think that's necessarily how, we work. I would never say to someone, you will never be able to have that biscuit again. But what I will say is, work out a way to have it where it doesn't affect your body in the same way as if you were to have it on its own randomly as a snack. Have it as a little treat after lunch, or cooking from scratch. And there's lots of ways that we can still allow ourselves to have like a piece of dark chocolate or whatever. It's not about cutting everything out. And it's that 80-20 rule, isn't it? Where you have to make sure, or you try to make sure, that you eat really well 80% of the time, but don't beat yourself up over one thing.
Yeah, the one thing that you did on a weekend isn't going to undo all the good stuff you did through the week. It's just not like that.
No, I think if you try to avoid things too much, it becomes then too much of an issue in itself, and that's then another stressor on your body, and we don't want that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in a summary then, do you have your sort of top tips for somebody who's got PCOS, probably tried to conceive for a while and feeling lost and confused?
I think, my main tip would be find someone who can help you with this, like a holistic practitioner, because PCOS is a whole body disease, and it needs a whole body approach. So, taking a drug or like going for IVF does not address the issues. So it's really important to look into those. And, if I had like 3 top tips that I would always give to like a PCOS client, I would say, eat more protein. Always aim for, say, 30-ish grams per meal. I've got a really handy protein content sheet, which you can download from my website, actually.
What's the link to that?
It will be sarahnash.co.uk/freebies.
Okay, we'll put that
in. So you can download it there. More protein. Make sure you always have healthy fats with every meal or snack. So think, nuts, seeds, avocado. etc. And do, I'd say, 30 minutes of very light to moderate movement every day. So, you know, that could be a couple of just 15-minute walks after lunch or dinner to kind of stabilize your blood sugar, or it could be something like, a yoga class or swimming, or, you know, just something that is not too strenuous, but movement is, it's really, really important for PCOS.
Yeah, but actually also something that builds a little bit of muscle can be really useful just for that insulin
strength training or resistance training. So things, actually, one of the things that I like to recommend to clients is like movement snacking. So, you know, like if you brush your teeth, just do a few squats while you're doing it. Or if you're waiting for the kettle to boil for a cup of tea, just grab a couple of bottles and do a few bicep curls, or, you know, just little things like that, just to keep moving and just build it in throughout the day. But just, make sure that you keep moving daily.
I think I would like to add to that, just get a really good, really comprehensive blood test, which your GP most certainly won't have done. So, you know, even if you can't afford to work with a practitioner, go and buy, you know, there's lots of companies out there that do private blood testing like Medichecks, and some of they have some super comprehensive panels that you can actually order yourself, carry out yourself, and then with those results, you can go back to your GP and start pushing for more tests, more information, more, you know, because they will show things up that they just don't check, do they? Or, you know, at least if you can only afford to have one session with a nutritionist, you know, they can sort of at least pinpoint you in the right direction with those blood tests. I think that's so important because, you know, the standard tests on the NHS just are not helpful.
They're just so limited, and then what they can do, and there's a lot of things that they just won't test for. One of the things specifically, again, for PCOS is thyroid. So, you know, if you have PCOS, there's a really strong link between PCOS and thyroid issues. And even though the GP does run a thyroid sort of panel, they don't look at the big picture. They generally will check TSH and maybe one or two other markers, but we really need to have that kind of entire picture that they don't test for. So there's a lot of private tests that we can recommend, and they're actually really affordable. So it's not a huge expense, but it just gives us so much more insight into what's going on.
A couple of £100 out there, but then you can actually also...
I think they're even just £90, the thyroid test. Yeah, they're not but pretty good,
the more comprehensive ones. But you can often get a discount code online, or... I just think it's so important. And, you know, and thyroid, and then, you know, iron ties into the thyroid, but there's about sort of 5 iron markers really that we want to look at. It's not just all about ferritin, you know, which is, and then there's like, it's all sort of interconnected, isn't it? But that definitely needs checking. Oh, thanks so much, Sarah. So what, you mentioned your website.
Yes. sarahnash.co.uk.
I'll put that in the show notes if anybody wants to get in touch. They
Lovely.
can. And you're also on Instagram as
Sarah Nash _fertility. I have attempted Facebook, but I just find I'm not really on there. So, so definitely Instagram is the best place to find me and kind of stay in touch, and or just contact me through my website, or my email is hello@sarahnash.co.uk, and I always respond. So if you want to chat, just drop me an email.
Yeah, always available for a free sort of quick discovery call to, you know, because we would never take on a client unless we thought we could help them, and so we always tend to have a call beforehand, just a short call to sort of find out more. And so Sarah, if you would like to have more of a chat about your personal situation. And thanks so much, Sarah. It's been so nice to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. It was really lovely.
Really enjoyed this chat with Sarah, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please like, share, save, and rate this podcast if you find it useful, as it helps us reach more people. And if you're looking for a fertility specialist to support you, our practitioners can be contacted over at www.fertilitynutritioncentre.org, and they all offer a free strategy call to help you decide on your next best steps on your journey. Thank you for listening.